Welcome to Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades. Tonight we have a wicked cool guest. I've been trying to get him on forever, but he is pretty evasive. But I also have my 14-year-old grandson, Sir Damon of Hesse, and because my co-host is absent. Eric Eastman, the Honorable Eric Eastman, was at the Boston International Film Festival all weekend, and on the film festival they have like 3 different theaters around the city, like one in Cambridge, one here, and they do all these films. And Eric did a film that I think we showed some of it at one point, maybe last year, called Spin the Plate. Is that what it's called? Yeah, Spin the Plate. And Eric got the Indie Award for Best Director, and his female lead, Becky Dennis, got the Indie Spirit Award, which is basically second place, like a silver medal. So they're having a lot of fun down in Boston. He's doing really great. So if you guys want to look up Eric Eastman's film, it's called Spin the Plate. And if you guys want to check it out, that'd be super cool. He's an awesome guy. Anyway, that's his plug. I don't know if I get a percentage or what, but so anyway, my guest is Senator Bob Giuda. Bob Giuda is awesome. He was, as you know, last week we talked about Marsy's Law. Bob was one of the few people that had the fortitude to step out from the train. Basically, a lot of times legislation comes through the legislature. It's like a freight train. If you stand in front of it, you're doomed. And Bob was one of the few that in the Senate that actually stepped out in front of this. And Bob and I have known each other since 2000. We both got we were freshman legislators together. Yeah. You sat in front of me and threatened to punch me if I voted the wrong way, which was pretty good. That kept me in line.
It took a while to train you, but
yeah, it took a while. So how are you doing?
Busy. It's that time of year, you know.
Yeah.
And, I'm on 3 committees, of course: Finance, Ways and Means, and Education. All 3 of those are pretty busy.
Right.
Lots of bills, lots of ideas, lots of amendments.
Right.
And it's just that busy time of year. You know,
Yeah,
we're getting ready to wrap up early because we're closing the 24th of May. We should be done.
Oh, really? It's that soon,
It's
huh?
that soon, yeah. So.
Now, what district? I don't know what district. I've been to your house, but I don't know what district.
Yeah,
it
I
is.
represent Senate District 2. At Senate District 2 is 27 towns, 19 in Grafton County, the southern end of Grafton County.
Yeah.
I have 5 towns in Belknap County, and then I have 3 towns in Merrimack County.
Holy mackerel! It's
a pretty big. It's a pretty big district.
That is
lots of miles and lots of roads, back
lots
roads.
Lots of tires.
Yeah, exactly. So.
Oh, that's pretty cool. I remember when you ran for Congress. Okay, so Sir Bob ran for Congress. I don't remember what year.
2010.
2010. And I don't have a lot of money, so I don't donate money hardly ever to candidates because I figured there's rich people that are donating, so why do I have to? You were one of the few people that I actually gave money to for running for Congress because you're one of the. There's a select group of people I know in the legislature that I can trust to be honorable, period. That I know if they tell me something, I might not agree with them, but I know what they're telling me is the truth.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate
and
that.
That is,
I feel
that
likewise.
is a rare, well, it is a rare commodity up there.
I wouldn't feel likewise when it comes to your case.
No, thanks, buddy. Thanks. And he wants me to get him something to eat afterwards.
Scott wants you to get him something to eat.
My other
I'm just coming along for the ride.
Oh, okay. Never mind. I guess I don't have any leverage then.
Your grandpa.
So what was the deal in the Senate on Marsy's Law? Because to me,
Marsy's Law. Yeah. First of all, and I was the first person in the parade of witnesses.
Yeah.
In the Senate Judiciary, chaired by Senator Carson.
Yeah.
To speak out against the bill as it was formulated.
Right.
And when we amend the state constitution, that is very serious business.
Oh, yeah.
We are setting the ground rules for an entire state, businesses, institutions, and people. And when you do that, you have to be very particular about every word and very careful equally, you have to be very careful not to get caught into the emotional rush to something that feels good, sounds good, but when you really take a hard look at it, is problematic. I was a co-sponsor. There were 22 Senate co-sponsors to that bill.
Right.
And I openly admit that. But when I read the bill through carefully, because the rush of legislation coming through, you read through things, and when you start reading it, this is a very dangerous amendment. It does a number of things that are really dangerous, constitutionally speaking, amongst which, as a rule, you never want to enshrine statutes in constitutional language.
Correct.
And that's what they're trying to do. The statute they're trying to enshrine already exists in state law and have for a number of years. So the problem is that the perception was, with all the emotional rush and the push and the out-of-state money and almost every major state lobbying firm bought and paid for to support this bill.
Do you have any idea how much money came into the state to start to push this through?
I have heard numbers. I can't verify their accuracy. I'd heard $2 million for starters, and another $2 million to push once it got towards the polls, which hopefully it won't.
Right.
So language in the bill specifically was statutory. We already have statutes. I did a research into a Department of Corrections study completed at the end of 2015, which indicated we don't have a problem with victims' rights. They interviewed over 500 of 2,300 victim crimes in that year.
Yeah.
And they came out raving, smelling like a rose, so to speak. So this is a problem we don't have. Okay? And that's one issue. The next problem is we're trying to enshrine in statute, in the Constitution, statutory language, which if a court changes the meaning of a word or strikes down the interpretation, now you have to amend the Constitution.
Yeah,
it's a very difficult process.
So
That's right.
So if we screwed up, we'd have to go back to the voters, and in the meantime, if it's a really bad screw-up, there are people being harmed by that mistake.
Sure. Well, and harm is an interesting word that you bring up, because this brings the third and I think really fatal flaw to this amendment as it was drafted, and the language they kept in. We have victims' rights statutes, Gary, on the books. If they're not being enforced, that's not a constitutional issue. That's an enforcement issue.
Correct.
And in the statute itself, which I intend to amend next year, and in this amendment, they exempt anybody that's responsible for applying victims' rights and taking care that they're, in fact, communicated to victims from any accountability whatsoever. And they enshrine that exemption in the Constitution. First time ever.
Right.
Okay? So we're not solving the problem. We're just casting it in stone in the Constitution. The same problem that we have. So I brought in a number of amendments. I think 3 or 4 different amendments.
Yeah.
First of all, I consider myself a student of the Constitution. I think I consider you the same. Dan, there were a group of us way back in 2000 that started studying this document and fairly conversant with it. The amendment was in direct conflict with Article 15. They wanted to bring in this as a part of Article 14, except Article 15 says you have a right to a face-to-face meeting with your accuser.
You have a right to face your accuser, period.
That was put in jeopardy with this amendment. So, so the admittance that I'm not the know-all, be-all on the Constitution led me to talk to retired Justice Carol Ann Conboy.
Yeah.
For whom I have a great deal of respect.
She was wicked good in the hearing.
Right.
Yeah.
And also, I never spoke directly with Professor Scheer at the law school at UNH, but they worked together.
Yeah.
And they drafted a couple of amendments, and I sponsored those amendments. One was not the right one. The second one they sponsored was the one I would have considered supporting.
Right.
What it did is it established a basis for victims' rights in the Constitution, but it didn't enumerate them.
Right.
And therefore, you would have what you need to give constitutional basis to the statutes we already have. Not that it makes a hill of bean difference.
Right.
Okay, because again, the Constitution provisions are no more self-enforcing than statutory provisions. And if you're not enforcing the one, why would you expect a change of behavior when you still have exempted the people that are responsible from any accountability? So it was fatally flawed. I stepped out against it, and I take umbrage when out-of-state special interests come here and try to dictate what we're going to do in our state, much
Right.
less how we're going to amend our Constitution to suit their own personal political preferences. That's
Right.
just not the way we do business here.
No.
And I empathize with victims. I have a daughter that's a victim.
Yep.
Okay? And so the fact of the matter is, I don't believe we have a problem based on the survey done by Department of Corrections. If we do have a problem, putting something in the Constitution isn't going to fix it.
No.
It's holding the people accountable who fail to enforce Marcy's law, who fail to apply it in those situations where it's relevant. We don't have that yet. And
Yeah.
that will be a mission that I think we should undertake in the next session.
So when it comes to not having a problem, I think it's fairly accurate. I'm not 100% sure whether that's the case or not, but based on what you've said, it seems like there's not too much of a problem. I think the problem is that it was put in the hands of someone whose family was victimized, and when you bring a problem to an emotional level, you're not necessarily thinking rationally. So what he did is he created or tried to create a law that would have fixed that specific scenario or would have helped them with that specific scenario, and not thinking about what would help every scenario. And
Or the possible consequences.
yeah, and also you said it gets rid of your right to face your accuser, and specifically what it does, in case people don't know about it, is if the accused decides that he wants to face the victim basically decides yes or no instead of the accused. So if he says I want to talk to the alleged victim, then the victim can just be like, no thanks.
Well, in our current law, you're right in concept, but we do have significant protections for against re-victimizing
Right.
victims. So if a defendant wants to depose a witness, it goes through the judge.
Yeah, the judge is the one who decides whether
And
it's
they're
necessary
very
or
careful, okay, to avoid re-victimizing, if you will. But you still have that right, and when it's appropriate to do that. So again, another.
not. But this constitutional amendment would have subverted that.
Right, would have said you don't have to.
You don't
the
have
option.
to.
It did a number of problems. It said you're entitled to counsel with the prosecutor. Well, the prosecutor represents the state, not the victim,
Right.
and the prosecutor's job is to prosecute a case. There was the big hue and cry about victims should have equal rights with defendants, and I disagree with that, and I'll tell you why. Because when you're charged by the state, the full power and force of the state comes against you. And in some cases, they're looking to take your life, okay, if you commit such a heinous crime. And your resources as an individual are very minimal compared to the enormous resources of the state. And that's why we have those constitutional protections for Mirandizing and all of those defendants' rights enshrined in the Constitution, because they fully recognize that while the defendant is entitled, the state has all the power in a
Right.
prosecution, all of it. And so, defendants have rights, but it's a different planet, it's a different sphere.
I mean, I agree that victims should have the same rights as the defendant, because I mean, a defendant won't be taken to court if there's not a sufficient amount of evidence to warrant prosecution. So I do think that they should have equal rights, but I think that the law not only borders it, but I think it far surpasses superiority of rights for the victim over the defendant, which is not fair.
Well,
because innocent
What rights do you think victims? I mean, when you say equal rights to the defendant, they're not. They're incongruous.
They
They're
can't
apples
be-
and oranges.
They can't be equal.
I mean,
Right.
I think that
Like a defendant has the right to a lawyer, has the right to remain silent, has the right to a jury. None of those are afforded the victim.
yeah, but why would they? They don't need those rights. They're not defendants.
Well, they might want their own lawyer.
I mean, that's just not something that exists.
I know, but under this, it
Are you
might.
speaking of the victims,
also-
or are you speaking of the defendants?
Speaking of the victim, and also, they don't have to go to court and face trial.
Yes,
so
they
there's-
have to go to court to face their accused.
Yes, but
they're
that's
accused.
not something that they don't have to face life in prison.
Correct.
So I feel maybe equals out.
What's this? Why do I have that?
The only part that I
Then,
agree is
then there is the problem of false accusations. which when you talk to the attorneys that do this work, are frequent. And you run the risk then of giving such stature to a victim that falsely accuses a defendant, and that happens. It happens more than anyone wants to really admit. Now what happens? Okay, you have partially disabled that person based on that amendment from facing the accuser. I mean, there's just too many things that flow out of this that are completely disruptive of our long-standing system of jurisprudence with respect to.
Well, one of the things Marcy's Law, if this went through, would do is as soon as somebody is accused, that person that is doing the accusing is defined as the victim. Okay? And I arrive at that because it says the victim has to be able to go to this hearing, this hearing, this hearing, and this hearing. And so if that's true, then by definition they're the victim as soon as the allegation's been made. And it's like Representative Birch pointed out, that in a trial, a judge typically will not let a prosecuting attorney refer to the defendant or refer to the person as the victim, because it prejudices the jury.
Right.
But this pushes into constitutional language that they can now be referred to as a victim, because they are.
And thereby jeopardizes the underlying premise of all criminal jurisprudence, which is you are innocent until proven guilty, not accused, not charged, but proven.
Right.
And this again, I said that would introduce amazing conflicts and contradictions within long-established criminal justice and laws.
It also, and they tried to take that out today, Bob. The AG came. I got an amendment today, this morning. The committee did, and the chairman,
Dave Welch.
Dave let the AG and his accomplices get up and talk about the amendment, because one of the problems with the original Marcy's Law, and I think you guys addressed this in the Senate, but it didn't go through as an amendment. The amendment got rid of juveniles. In the original Marcy's Law, a juvenile would be subject to Marcy's Law. And the thing with a victim in Marcy's Law, it's not just the victim, and it's not necessarily rape or molestation or anything else. It can be drinking and driving. It could be just about anything. And it could be a robbery.
In which case the store is a victim and is entitled to restitution. Well, if the victim is indigent, if the perpetrator is indigent, the state then is on the hook if you put this in the Constitution, because it's a constitutional mandate.
Right.
So, it doesn't work. And many of the states that have implemented this are finding that there are serious problems with it. Okay? Our laws are pretty good, and we have a very well-populated legislature that keeps a very close eye on them. So again, Marcy's Law is already in our law. Marcy's amendment today failed. What was the vote? Do you remember?
24 to 11.
24 to 11. So
we still have to beat it on the House floor.
And I don't think that's going to be difficult.
I don't know. This guy's got a lot of money. He spent a lot of money trying to get this through. And that's why one of the legislators in my committee says, well, let's let the voters decide. And I said, well, no, not really, because that's why we have the constitutional framework we have. It has to get a supermajority in the House and the Senate. And the reason it does that is because we as legislators in this committee have now listened to going on 9 or 10 hours worth of testimony, plus reading and learning stuff on the side. The voters are not going to be able to collect all that information. All they're going to know is right before the election in November and October is a repeated $1 million campaign.
Full court press.
Full court press with victims coming on TV and Chris Sununu hugging them and saying we got to get this done for the victims, and people will not understand the total perversion of the Constitution Marcy's Law really is.
I actually looked at the website in research of the thing of Marcy's Law, and the website basically just says we believe that victims deserve equal rights, and then just keep saying, like, listing different people that of big names like senators and governors, or specifically Governor Sununu. Like, they just go down a list of names and they say this person believes victims deserve equal rights, and it's not at all explaining what the law is. It's just saying, hey, we think this person deserves equal rights. So even if a person were under a voting scenario,
My question is, equal rights to what? What is unequal? They're disparate, okay? Victims have the rights of standing, and a defendant has the right to be free from the overwhelming power of the state in a way that would jeopardize their ability to defend against, right, innocent until proven guilty.
Right.
But still, in a scenario that a group of people or the state were to vote, if even they decided to just do a little bit of research and they saw that immediately, they would assume, well, that seems fair, I'll just go vote for it.
Yes. Yeah, that kind of, like you say, the website and the advertisements, I think it would easily pass if it gets to the voters. That's why it's really, I implore my viewers, all 5 of them, to call their legislators. Hey, so anyway, you got to get this. This is beautiful. So the Attorney General comes before us with this amendment. It was similar to an amendment that you guys had in the Senate that you rejected. And Representative Rollard from Goffstown says this. She goes down to line 18 or 19 on the thing, and it says, over the case, I have a hard time seeing, so.
Where do you want?
No, it's okay. Over the case and have enforced the rights enumerated in this article and any other right afforded to the victim by law. Afforded by the victim by law. What that means is that if this were enacted as a part of our Constitution, any law relative to victims in statute would be elevated to constitutional
stature. Yeah.
And so I said, considering that, we would have to spend all summer trying to discern all the ramifications of that, because with all those different RSAs that we have relative to victims, some of them got to jeopardize the rights of the accused.
Yeah.
And it was the Attorney General's response was,
Yeah. I think he's put in an unfortunate position, and I will tell you that I respect Gordon MacDonald, but I've told him, we had a meeting, and I said, Attorney General, I think it's inappropriate for you to be weighing in before a bill is passed and suggesting that this language, which is clearly flawed, and I'm not an attorney, never went to law
Right.
school, but I study the Constitution.
yeah,
I've
we've
in
been
this
around.
game
We've
for-
also been
Right.
around forever
That's
too.
right. That I think it has the potential to cause credibility issues. And so, I respect him highly. I hope that he can weather this event. I know that I was a member of the House for 6 years,
Yeah.
and I respect the House. Its processes are sometimes torturous, sometimes
Oh,
tedious,
yeah, they can be
sometimes
brutal, yeah.
angering, but they're always, at the end of the day, most of the time, they come out with the right product.
Yeah.
And so, the politics of this in the Senate were amazing, and I'm not going to disrespect the Senate by elucidating on that. But I worked very hard, and my issues were very, very solid.
Right.
And so the Senate passed it out with the necessary majority. It went to the House, and the House, I think, did what was necessary to a very poorly crafted, well intended in one respect.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But as I said early on, when you begin to involve the emotional freight train and bring in a parade of women who have been brutally victimized,
Yeah.
and they present their stories, and what you do is you capture the emotional attention of a citizenry who you want to have objectively look at the true impact of the legislation they're considering turning into a piece of that Constitution. And so I'm grateful that the House did what it did, the committee did what it did today, and I'm told it's probably going to be a full court press by the governor and other supporters
Oh, I bet.
to
Between now
reverse
and
that,
next week,
to turn
it's
it
gonna
around.
be, oh yeah, yeah.
When is the bill going to be heard? Do you assume next week or the
I
following
presume
week?
next week.
Okay.
But here's the interesting thing. You were there, I think, during that. Representative Birch, by the way, so you know that this is not a Republican-Democrat thing.
No.
There's Democrats and Republicans who are all opposed to this. But anyway, Representative Birch, my Democratic accomplice on the Judiciary Committee, last week, when the governor was there, asked him specifically, because you've broadened the definition of victim to anybody that's either harmed or tangentially harmed by an event.
Correct.
So if there's a shooting, I would presume everybody who's got PSTD in that area, PTSD, some letters, is qualifies as a victim. And maybe they're missing work, so maybe their wife qualifies as a victim because they've had to take them to the hospital, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And he said, and Representative Birch asked the governor, basically, how are you going to pay for all these victims? Where's the money coming from? And the governor tweaked. The governor said, basically, we can't, I have the quote, I can give you the quote if you want it, but in effect, he said, we can't think about money. This is victims. This is more important than money.
Right.
Which, to me, was...
We didn't swear an oath to victims, Gary. And,
No.
And I empathize. As I said, my daughter lives with me. She's
Yep.
in her 30s, okay? And my grandson. But we didn't swear an oath to victims or to a statute or to a political cause. We swore an oath to support and defend the Constitution. This would have been an egregious wound to the Constitution that we have, which really is an excellent document and has lasted many, many years, been through some revisions. We worked in 2006, I think it was 2006. I happened to be the prime sponsor of the Kilo versus New London.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, there's going to be a movie in Hooksett.
And I will be there.
Awesome. I get one of her. It's too. Anyway, I got one of her shingles from her house. She sent me and the
House
guy.
is still there.
It is.
Still there.
Anyway,
Still
sorry.
Yeah.
I
So,
was pretty excited about that.
I hold that responsibility above all others.
Yeah.
Tax policy, school board, we swore an oath to that Constitution, and anything that's going to change it needs to be carefully, not emotionally, carefully, rationally analyzed, vetted, and the inadvertent potential consequences thought through carefully.
Oh, yeah.
That was not done here.
No, not
This
at
was an
all.
emotional rush to capitalize on genuine and I believe warranted emotions. You do not want to pass laws or amend constitutions under the heat of emotion.
Unfortunately, that's the problem with a lot of laws, is because no one wants to go out of their way to start a movement or a law that is not filled with emotion typically. Typically, most drastic changes in something are driven by a cause, and a cause can often call change in emotion.
All right, you're better at reading than me. This is this is a direct quote from Governor Sununu last Wednesday.
He showed this to me. He does misspeak, and it sounds kind of ridiculous. If all you want to look at is the cost of dollars, that's the old way of doing things. If all you want to look at the cost of dollars is followed by that, which makes no sense if you listen to it
That's all right,
grammatically.
but that's a direct quote from the governor. That doesn't sound like Republican, I'll tell you that. Yeah, it was. Oh, and the other thing too, as far as Marcy's law, we presume that this is going to happen, like for victims. Well, what if the victim, quote unquote, and the family, who now have a right,
Constitutional rights.
they have
right.
constitutional right to assert themselves in the process. What if they don't want that person convicted? You know as well as I do, especially in domestic violence cases, oftentimes the perpetrator goes back home and says, "Oh, I was drunk, I'm wicked sorry, I'll never do it again." The state still currently has a case because there was harm done, and the state is representing the state, not the victim.
Right.
Under this, all of a sudden the whole family shows up and is able to assert themselves in the process. saying that it was all a mistake, it was misunderstanding, we don't want to prosecute, we want dad back, or little kids show up. It could be a total horror show.
Yeah, they'd have the right to be heard, as I understand it, but they wouldn't have the right to direct the outcome. And once charges are filed, the victims have the prosecutor moves on in a well-established course of action, motions, pleadings, filings, all of those things.
That's not what it says, though, Bob. It says now remember, this is so people understand, this is a constitutional amendment.
Right.
This supersedes any law. Law is subject to this. This is what it says in the amendment. The victim or his or her lawful representative or the attorney for the government, upon request of the victim, may assert in any trial or appellate court. So the word may, if it was a statute, would mean possibly, but it's in the Constitution, so I think that word may is completely different, because it says they may do this.
Doesn't say they shall.
Yes, but it's in the Constitution now.
It's still an option. I think even elevated at that level, I would.
I'm not positive. I tell you, I can see attorneys looking at that going, oh. Anyway, but yeah, it's nuts. It's
Lots
nuts.
of things going on. House and Senate bills back and forth. There are a number of other bills that are
what
of importance. I'm looking at Senate Bill 557. Senate Bill 557 established the Housing Appeals Board
Housing Appeals Board.
as an alternative appellate process for individuals or companies or developers that want to develop properties.
Oh.
To appeal decisions of the Planning Board, Zoning Board of Adjustment, okay, or Board of Selectmen on their projects.
Right.
And current law says if you want to do that, you go to Superior Court, and it could be 1, 2, 3, 5 years, and 10,
wow.
20, 50, 100, 200,000. We got cases where over $1 million, okay, and the time delay. And so we're facing a workforce housing shortage desperately. We
Yeah.
had 7 hours of briefings on Friday in the State House
Excuse me.
by different agencies, including a representative from, although he wasn't representing, he was a member of the Boston Fed, and on real estate and so forth. And the price of rents in this state is astronomical, and it just continues to rise.
Yep.
Because we have appeals process that takes years to accomplish in many cases, and tens of thousands of dollars. So that's a chilling effect. We have developers who are no longer willing to work in New Hampshire. They're finding it, and I quote, much easier to do construction in Massachusetts than it is in New Hampshire.
Which is kind of pathetic.
It's sad. So that bill,
Now, if that went through, would that mean, like, there's certain people in Ware who do not want any construction at all? Because I disagree with them. I think we should try to encourage industries to come in and try to bring down the tax rate. But would this mean that a company, let's say Widgets Incorporated, wants to build in an industrial area in Ware, would they be able to? The zoning board obviously is going to reject that because they don't want anything. Would they be able to go to this appeals board and say, "Hey, I want to build this"? They won't even give me the time of day.
this bill only applies to residential housing because we're looking to, what we call balanced housing, right?
Right.
Workforce, high-end workforce.
Is multifamily homes the same as residential, or is that
They are
slightly
residential.
different?
Yeah,
Okay.
no, they're residential.
I don't know.
So there's projects that would enable us to have workers, homes for workers that are affordable, are all being stalled in many cases because of, frankly, the abuse of the judicial process, filings and pleadings and motions,
Right,
and
right.
delay, and at the end of the day, the funding packages for these projects are not perpetual. If a project is being stalled and an investor says, I got a better chance in Massachusetts and here's the project, that's it.
Right.
And de facto, while complying with the law, quote unquote, in the appeals process, you've killed the project.
Yes.
And that happens a lot in this state. It's
That
unfortunate.
happens all over the place.
So if we're looking to be serious about bringing jobs, which are, you would think, people would understand in the legislature that this is an essential component of the economy, we've got to have these jobs, all right? You suppose that they would support. So it went through Senate, it went through House, it went through the Senate, no
Yep.
problem. Got into House Judiciary. The chairman vacated the bill to finance, was given to Division One.
Wait. I don't think I ever heard that.
Yeah, it was vacated, and so just today they came out with an interim study motion, which it de facto
Kills it.
could kill it, but certainly doesn't pass it. And we need this bill.
Right.
We need this bill because businesses, we talk to them all the time. Businesses are choosing to locate in other states because one of the major questions and concerns they have is what's the availability of housing for the employees we're going to need.
Right.
Right. So I think you're going to see a fight on this on the floor of the House.
Now, is this a fight? Yeah, finance is a terrible place to put it because that puts it in Neil Kirk's lap, and Neil Kirk does not like construction. He's not an advocate.
I think, frankly, the breadth, the support that we have for this bill spans the entire political spectrum,
Right.
far left to far right. Okay, building contractors, homeowners, realtors, housing advocates, business industry association. You know,
Can you
all
give-
these agency organizations that have the common interest of providing housing so that people can work in our state. We
How-
can provide new businesses with homes for their employees.
How fair is the system? Let's just call it just fairness. In other words, I've got investors and I got $1 million in my pocket and I want to buy land in Manchester and build a housing project or some apartment buildings. Is there situations, there must be situations where if I'm well connected, I'll get those permits pretty quickly. But if I'm not, it could take a lot of money.
There are numerous cases of abuse of all sorts. People that don't want something to progress or a board that doesn't want a project will find ways to appeal it. And remember this, okay, under New Hampshire Constitution, a town has no limit on legal fees.
Yeah,
You can go as deep into the well as you need to, okay? That's not the case with an individual who may have a righteous case and being obstructed and obfuscated and delayed and undermined by the process of the
Right.
legal system, and that's what happens a lot. And so ultimately, it goes away. And those who want to see things stay as they are triumph. They win.
so if you've got X number of thousands of dollars to create the building, X number of thousands of dollars to buy the acreage, X number of thousands of dollars to the infrastructure, if you have to spend twice that to get it through all the various boards in a city or town, it just eats up all your profit.
It does, well, not really, because what happens is those costs get passed on to the homeowner.
Oh, okay.
Ultimately, I mean, that's so we're elevating the price of homes even higher, and so this is all just designed as an alternative process. You still have the right to take it to the Supreme Court. Okay,
Right.
so a person that is disagreeing with the decision of a local board, okay, would have a choice. It's their choice to go to Superior Court, as it is under current law, or to take it to the Housing Appeals Board.
Right.
And then that decision of the Housing Appeals Board is then appealable to the Supreme Court. All right, and as the decision out of Superior Court would be. All it does is provide an alternative track. But there's tremendous pressure from those who have no problem, okay, with the misuse, abuse, or let's just leave it at misuse and abuse of the current process to meet their own ends, even if those ends are in conflict with state law regarding housing.
Okay.
Yeah, and so an appellant has to spend lots of money to appeal the
overcome.
process, and it chills the whole thing. So we don't have the workforce housing.
Right.
You know, average rents in New Hampshire are approaching $2,000 a month.
I know. His
Yeah.
mama is trying to work full time and pay for rent for the kids, and it's
It's going to get worse.
It's
This
just-
bill provides a vehicle that will enable us to build housing totally, it doesn't override local control. It totally adheres to and respects local ordinances. It just makes sure that those ordinances are being applied fairly by those empowered to enforce them and not being abused and the process abused to suit a certain political end.
Yeah, because I think if you get a project, you have to go through maybe the building,
You'd start with probably the planning board,
planning board,
zoning board of adjustment. You may want a variance for something or other.
fire, you have to have,
Well, the permitting comes at the end.
okay,
All right, so you go through that process, and that's the process where the problem really lies.
okay.
That's the process that's very easy to subvert. With all, it's legal, doesn't make it ethical, and certainly doesn't make it good for the economy of our state.
Wow, yeah.
Senate Bill 557, talk to your representatives. Take a look up on the internet at the state's website, and you'll find it in there, and take a look at it.
So what else you got in the fire, young man?
Oh, my. I had 18 bills in this time,
You did?
and that was a lot. That was
I think
more
you wrote me in as co-sponsor on a
than
couple.
some of them, yeah.
Yeah.
So, anyway, that's, to me, right now, the signature piece that's in front of us is 557. The governor supports it totally. Business and industry, housing advocates, all of this, because it is a structural problem for the entire economy of the
Oh,
state.
yeah.
And if we don't address it, businesses are
Why,
turning away.
why would a business open up a place where there's no place for anybody to live
Right.
if they hire them?
Right.
Yeah, no, I get it. That makes sense.
The workforce preparedness is another huge issue. And I sit on Senate Education as the vice chair. We're moving a lot of legislation forward to try to marry the high schools, the product, the pipeline, if you will, to the need. And so Chancellor Ross Cattell from the community college system doing an outstanding job. Dual and concurrent enrollment, so you can be a high school student and get college credits.
Yep.
For courses, providing your teachers have certain credentials. They're basically accredited to teach at the college level. They're teaching in high school, and you get credit for the college course. I mean, it's a really good program that accelerates a person that's focused and down the road towards a better education.
Are we doing something to start, because we veered away from that a long time ago when Bill Clinton and Bush Sr. decided that we were going to go to a service-based economy. They veered away from trades. And now they're saying, hey, wait a second, that was stupid.
If I were a young man today, I would be looking to be an electrician.
You're not a young man?
I fool a lot of people.
Yeah, I know.
So- And that's one of the problems is it's for 40 years it's been college degree. Well, you know what? We need the whole world has changed. A college degree isn't necessarily what you need, but certifications by Microsoft or whomever that you're competent in these certain specialties with software or hardware. And that's where our community college system plays a really vital role.
Yeah.
And I think I have a great deal of respect for Chancellor Cattell and what he's doing with that program. The Running Start, which is the high school concurrent and dual enrollment,
Yeah.
over 100 of our high schools have that today, right here in the state. And those kids come through those courses, and they get college credit for those courses from institutions all around the country. So it saves you money as an individual, accelerates you down the track towards college, reduces costs, and helps the workforce, grow in a way that it should.
Yeah, because I know there's like a lot of jobs out there for machinists and things like that, and there's nobody to fill the jobs.
Yeah, we have lots of workforce issues. 30% of our workforce can't pass a drug test. Wow. 30%. We have a mass exodus of our graduates from high school and from college.
Yeah.
Some of that's lifestyle, meaning they want a more
Well, if they're young, they
urban-
might want to go to Boston where there's
Right.
more theater and all this other stuff, yeah.
Right.
And then come back here when they want to have kids, because you don't want to bring them up in Boston.
the
Did I say something bad?
the ARMI, Advanced Regenerative Manufacturing, right?
What's that?
That's Dean Kamen's project.
Okay.
Is bring right here to Manchester, in the mill yard. It's a project that takes what has been research that's standing on the shelf in our universities and research institutions to regenerate human organs.
Ooh.
Okay, he received an $80 million contract from the Department of Defense. You can understand that with what's going on with IEDs and our young men and women.
Right.
But also 400,000 people need kidneys. 400,000 people on dialysis in the country. Major possibility of changing lives for the better.
Yeah.
And he brought it here. He has $300 million in backup investors ready to go as soon as this thing gets done.
Right.
We've provided some tax incentives through the Senate. They went over to the House, so we'll see what the House does with them. This makes New Hampshire, if we're successful, the Silicon Valley for global regenerative manufacturing. Okay, the world headquarters right here. A game changer for our economy. Do we need workforce housing? Right back to Senate Bill 557.
Yeah.
We've got $300 million of investor money waiting to come here. We can't find places to build houses. Okay, and so it has the propensity as well, since Manchester would be the hub, not Boston. If you look at our development, if you went concentric rings around Boston, you can see how the southern tier of New Hampshire gets developed. This would establish this global center right here in Manchester, right in the middle of the state.
Right.
And then you would see concentric rings of businesses growing
Relative to
further
that,
north.
to support
Okay.
that.
We have a Senate Bill 365, which is addressing a critical issue in the North Country. Biomass, energy, obviously on everybody's radar, because we have amongst the highest energy costs in the country.
Yes.
And so it's an attempt to establish a price support for the energy produced by the biomass industry. And while I'm not normally a proponent of that,
And it doesn't sound right.
well, the problem is this, okay? The renewable energy credits,
Explain what biomass is, because that could be...
basically burning wood chips
Wood
to
chips.
generate electricity.
Okay.
All right, so we've got 6 biomass plants in New Hampshire.
Biomass could be Soylent Green.
Could be.
Yeah. That's where my mind goes
Okay,
anyway.
well, we know all about you and your mind. So, we have 6 biomass plants. One is already shut down. The other 5 are hanging on for dear life.
Okay.
This would provide, and why is it different? Okay, again, I understand free market economics. I support that. This is different because when we talk about energy independence, this is energy independence. The
Right.
fuel is New Hampshire.
Right.
The people that cut the fuel off the stump are New Hampshire. The people that move that fuel to the lumber mills that then make lumber are New Hampshire. The 60% of every log, that's what they call low-grade wood, that's turned into chips. The guys that do that are New Hampshire.
Right.
The guys that move those chips in their trucks to the biomass plants,
French.
the folks that that operate the biomass plants themselves, the folks that process the waste, the fly ash, it's all New Hampshire. Every single dollar, and what I call that economic ecosystem,
Right.
is a New Hampshire dollar. And so we're looking at the potential of 900 lost jobs. And then you start talking about a cost as opposed to a slightly higher electric cost.
Have
You
the-
got foreclosures. You got each of these employees has a home. They're paying a
Right,
mortgage.
right.
They're paying health insurance, et cetera, et cetera. And the small business fallout from that within the
As-
North Country
as-
is going
as
to be
the-
devastating.
Has the UNH used some of the talent at UNH to try to look at these
Yeah. Oh, yes.
biomass plants and try to find out where you could nip and tuck to try to
The
make
problem
them more
is
profitable?
that the RGGI, I should say the Renewable Portfolio Standard, the RPS, is the problem. They provide a valuation for what's called renewable energy credits.
Yeah.
And these plants are older, so they're not eligible for as many. And the fact is that the price for those biomass renewable energy credits is very, very low. They
Okay.
produce their energy on the spot market. So it's financially untenable without
Some sort
the
of
ability. This bill, 365, Senate Bill 365, enables them to sell to a default producer at a guaranteed rate.
Okay.
And so that enables them to keep operating, and it also maintains our energy independence. So
Right.
it's a difficult situation. I have no idea where it's going to go. I just, for the hope of the families, I addressed science, energy, technology in the House, and I said, look, okay, if we go and do everything based on absolute cost
Yep.
and everything based on pure science, we don't need to be here. So our job as legislators is to balance those issues of expense and cost versus the human issues. And
Yeah, not everything's black and white.
it's not. It's not, because you can say, well, we're going to pay this much more for electricity, and it's some, but it's not bad. But if you don't do this, how do you calculate the costs of foreclosures, the costs of unemployment, the costs of suicides and alcoholism, which, as you know, the number one cause of problems in families is what? It's lack of money. So you just killed 900 jobs. You put 900 families at risk.
Right.
and the social costs, the recovery from alcoholism, all those things will be enormous.
Yeah.
So how do you put that into the equation for what are you willing to pay for your electricity? You know,
Yeah,
it's difficult. If it
It
was
is.
easy, everyone would do it.
exactly.
So
So now you ran for the Senate. Is that because you just wanted to do a lot more work for $100 a year, or?
Senator Forrester held this seat before me,
Yeah,
and when she announced for governor, the seat came open.
right.
And I was approached by some folks, both in the Senate and elsewhere, because they'd seen my 6 years in the House, and I've stayed locally active. I'm on the school board. I'm the town moderator. And they said, well, we think you have a shot. Would you consider it? And so I did. And of course, I had a very, very, very tough primary, but I won pretty convincingly, and then I had a very strong race.
How was-
Interestingly, both the candidates were from the small town of Warren.
Okay.
Who I'm on the school board and the town moderator, and my opponent, Charlie Chandler, who is on the select board and is the school moderator.
Oh, that's too funny.
Yeah, it is. And so we fought a good, hard, clean fight. And interestingly enough, the parties are throwing all this smear stuff over the top. And we said, we're just going to keep it clean and keep it on the issues. And so Charlie's a good friend. We've been friends for 20 years plus.
Yeah, that's going to be tough when you start when you're friends, because that's kind of like in Ware. I run against other people, and I have no animosity towards them, but on a state rep level, there's no real quote unquote attack ads. Nobody's got that kind of money. I actually wanted to do an attack ad against me. Okay, so this is the greatest. This is
funny. This sounds
this
good.
is greatest thing that ever happened in the House. So we had a bill. I forget it was school funding or something. It had to do with schools. And Paul Ingridson was going to get up and testify opposite to the way I was intending to vote. And you and I and Paul probably vote with each other
Pretty closely, yeah.
90-something
Sure.
percent of the time. So when Paul says he's getting up to vote to speak against something that I'm for, or vice versa, it's like, whoa, wait a second, maybe I'm wrong. Because Paul's a very thoughtful,
That's right.
really sharp guy. So I stayed in the room and listened to what he had to say. And if you listen to it really carefully, you could say it was like, basically saying, I'm voting this way, but if you really listen to him carefully, it was, I really don't want to. He was in leadership.
Yeah.
One of those deals. So anyway, I'm sitting there listening, trying to find out what's going on. But I was sitting there reading Shotgun News. I was like thumbing through Shotgun News. Channel 9 runs an article that night, and they interviewed Bill O'Brien. They interviewed, I think, the governor. They interviewed the minority leader and the majority leader and all these other people about this bill. It was a big bill. And then they says, and yet some people weren't even paying attention, and they had a picture of me over my shoulder, and there was a girl in a bikini and a shotgun.
Oh, jeez. Oh, no.
It was great. It was just beautiful.
It made CNN, right? No, WMUR.
WR. It was on
CNN was when you were blowing up the Hillary signs, right?
No, when I was protecting Trump signs.
Oh.
That was CNN.
And saying liberal commie scum.
Right, and I
I
said,
want to get back to Senate Bill.
we only got like 1 minute. Go ahead.
557.
557.
Really important
Last
bill.
pitch.
And let me give you the names of some of the supporters, if I might. All right. BIA, Business and Industry Association, Manchester Chamber of Commerce,
Yeah.
New Hampshire Home Builders, New Hampshire Association of Realtors, New Hampshire Planners Association, the Workforce Housing Coalition of the Greater Seacoast, Nashua United Way, Mount Washington Valley Workforce Housing Coalition, Housing Action New Hampshire. I mean, this is business people, construction people, because ultimately new businesses that come to the state, since remember our rentals are chock-a-block, okay, require new construction. So
Yeah.
you could say that construction is the baseline for the beginning of a new of economic growth.
Right.
And what we have now is a system that is choking that. Senate Bill 557 will relieve that. It will keep the level playing field. It sustains due process, and it provides an alternative track that's much less expensive for both the town, whose taxpayers are paying those legal costs, hundreds of thousands of dollars in many cases, and the individuals who are appealing. So it's a good bill, and you should support it.
Senator Giuda, you're awesome. You're just a great guy, and I am so glad that you finally came on the show. We got to get you back here and talk about what's going on in your personal life sometime when things chill out a little bit, because you're
Very personal.
no, seriously, it's you are a power of example.
Thank you very much, Gary. I appreciate that.
Very personal.
Damon, you're all right. You didn't do anything really bad. Hey, see you guys next week.
Take care.